And welcome back, everyone, to Overtime. As we teased earlier, our special guest is on board here tonight, and he is none other than a guy really that needs no introduction, but we provide one with him anyway. We're talking about none other than world-class Gerald Glass from Greenwood, Mississippi, having starred at Amanda Elsie, and he also starred at Delta State, then Ole Miss, and then it was off to the NBA. First-round draft pick by the Minnesota Timberwolves back in 1990. Thanks so much, Gerald, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here on Overtime on this Sunday evening. We appreciate your time. So much to dive into because we were talking even before we got here on the couch to begin this interview about your career and all the games you played on the college, high school, pro level, and we're going to try to touch on a little bit of every aspect of your basketball career, starting out with your upbringing in Greenwood, because that's where you were rooted, that's where you began your love for basketball. What are some of your memories as far back as you can remember when you fell in love with the game of basketball?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
My love for basketball started back, you know, at my grandmother's house on Bowie Lane. They had a little court next to the house. And I would always go out. I would get my little ball from the grocery store. And while the bigger kids were playing, I would always interrupt their games, and they would kick my ball away. But and I also had relatives that played. I had an aunt and an uncle that played in high school, and they kind of like encouraged me to play as well.
So you pick up the basketball, you fall in love with it, and did you know that this was something when you started playing basketball at a young age, something that you may want to do long term as far as a career is concerned?
Well, back then, you know, as a kid, you know, I played baseball, I did a little music, so you know, all of those things were kept me occupied, and I tried to do my best in each and every one of them. But I never thought about playing basketball as a career until I saw Dr. J play for the first time, and that was kind of like what kind of pushed me on.
So that was one of your heroes growing up, Dr. J, Julius Erving?
Yes, yes, but my first actual basketball hero was a guy right here from Greenville, Gerald Watson. You know, I saw him play against Greenwood High growing up as a kid, and when I, you know, first saw him dunk, you know, that's when dunking, you know, was allowed back in high school. So Gerald Watson was one of the best players I've ever seen. Wow,
we're gonna have to track down Daryl, find out where he is today. Maybe
he was one of the guys. I was Gerald Watson in my backyard.
Wow. So your senior year at Amanda Elsie High School, I remember reading a quote from David Whitney, late Alcorn State men's basketball coach, said you were the best player in the state your senior year in high school. You come out and you signed with Delta State. What was that recruiting process like for you?
Well, you know, back in those days, I had Ole Miss and Southern Miss. They were recruiting me early on in the season, and for some reason they fell off towards the end. And you know, I had narrowed my choices down to Alcorn, Jackson State, Valley, and Delta State. And I just sat down and looked at the teams, and Delta State had the best team. And plus, I was already familiar with Coach Murphy from going to his, the camps that, a couple of years before that. And so, it was an easy decision for me.
Wow. So right down the road, Valley.
Yes.
Was there any pressure? Was there any pressure?
Yes, it was a lot of pressure. I almost signed with Valley. Okay. It was almost, but I decided to go to Delta State. They had the better team.
So you go to Delta State, freshman year, you shine right away. Then the second year, I believe you're under Coach Reeves, because Coach Murphy, he decided to go to Ole Miss.
Yes.
And so you get ready for your junior season and decided you're going to make a move as well. Tell us about what went into that decision to leave Delta State after 2 years and join your former coach, now your current coach at Ole Miss, Coach Murphy.
Well, my freshman year at Delta State, we played against Mississippi State in Starkville, and we beat them.
Wow.
And we beat Alcorn that year. So we were the best team in Mississippi.
Wow.
And my sophomore year, Murphy left after that season. I think that's what got him the job. We beat Mississippi State. So he decided to go to Ole Miss, and I decided to stay back another season and transfer after my sophomore year. And we made the Final Four at Delta State, and which made it tough for me to leave, man. I love Delta State, and I was happy there. So, but it was an opportunity to play in the SEC, something I wanted to do out of high school after being overlooked.
Wow, wow. So you go to Ole Miss, and man, the name becomes somewhat like a household name.
Jumper to Glass, again puts the ball on the floor. Gerald Glass taking control early.
One particular game I can think of, the LSU game.
Yes, sir.
The LSU game versus Chris Jackson goes into overtime. You score 53 points. Chris Jackson scores 55, but you get the last laugh because Ole Miss wins the game. What do you remember about that game and the flow of it, how you guys were just kind of going back and forth? Were you just locked in one of those moments where you said, hey, Chris, anything you can do, I can do better?
Well, actually, it was a tale of two halves. The first half I was hot, and the second half he was hot. But it wasn't a game where we were going back and forth, you know, like he scored, I scored. It was just a night, man. I was hot, and I just took advantage of every opportunity offensively. So it was one of those nights I was really, really aggressive, and I was lucky that I was hot.
All right, well, I tell you what, we're going to take our first time out of this interview portion, but we'll return. We're going to talk about that transition from college to the NBA and also the transition after that into coaching. We'll be right back with much more with world-class Glass. Gerald Glass here joining us on Overtime right after this short break.